Good evening, folks, and welcome to the session this evening. We just ran the Afrikaans session at 5 o'clock, as you might have seen there. My name is Paul Renken. Jaco will be along shortly. Welcome to the session. We're going to talk about the weather, all those details. We've got through the Afrikaans session, and my Afrikaans managed to get you through there. Jaco is going to go through some details. There is going to be an opportunity to ask questions. Please listen to the recording, listen to the details, listen to what we are presenting. We did get some questions beforehand that we're going to talk about as well. So thank you for those folks that sent them through beforehand. We are going to be taking a recording of this session. You will see that it is being recorded. We will distribute that to all the attendees and the absent registrations that maybe haven't been able to get here. So you will get a full recording of this session. And then you can also then use it elsewhere with the rest of your governing bodies so that you are informed. I'm not going to go through any other details other than to hand over to Jaco. Jaco, good evening, and over to you.
Yeah, evening from a very chilly Bloemfontein. It's raining, so we don't complain about the rain, but the chilly weather is a bit abnormal for Bloemfontein, so you'll see me in a jacket at the end of October. In any case, thank you for joining us for this feedback session on what happened in Parliament last week. I'm going to switch with computers, and I'll put myself in a small block, so this will be the presentation mode, so just make sure that you've got a wide screen on speaker view, and then you'll get the most out of it. Just before I continue, I just want to show this ad, that Sim for Schools project. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to raise funds, also for our legal fund, and I'll touch on that a bit later. If you haven't yet decided about joining us on the Sim for Schools project, it's a wonderful project. So just scan it or just make contact, go to our website and get all the information. But that's a very innovative way of doing passive fundraising at your school. So join us for that. Then, if I can go back to my presentation, I'm going to talk about the BELAB. Now, what is BELAB? Just for those who still don't know, the acronym is the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. It's not law, it's a bill. And it's a bill until signed by the president. So nobody can say it can be enforced after Thursday's vote. Not in the Eastern Cape, not in Mpumalanga. It's not law yet, and hopefully it will not become law. So it's still a bill, a concept wet in Afrikaans. That's a bill. What happened in Parliament? You would have noticed that we were part of a picketing line outside Parliament. It was organized by one of the political parties, the DA and the Freedom Front and the ACDP were there. The DA took the initiative to arrange everything, and then a number of civil society organizations staged the protest outside an hour or two before the debate. And there you can see the FEDSAS posters with my colleagues joining me in the picketing line. And we picketed against the state overreach. Our constitution starts with the words, we the people. And what we see with the BELA bill is we the government. And we protest against the centralization of power. And that's our biggest concern with the bill. It's not only language or admissions, it's overreach of the state. It's where the state tries to control more and more of society. And moving back towards a system that we've stepped away from, a state schooling system. And I think that's the biggest concern. We were the only organization present during the debate in the National Assembly. The only other people who joined me in the public gallery were Mr. Jameson Glebe from the National Department and Advocate Shalili Misser from the legal services of the National Department. So no other organizations were present during that during the whole debate, but I'll touch on that. There's some of the photos from just outside Parliament. I was in front of the gate that will face the National Assembly, the old building that was burned down. They're busy cleaning it up to start with the renovations. So we sat in one of the other smaller venues. But there you can see some of the political parties, the posters, the ACDP and Freedom Front, the homeschooling sector were there. The Kaapse Forum, Solidarity, and other organizations. There's a photo with Helen Ziller, and then the homeschoolers on the BELA bill. And I had a moment on stage to deliver our message as well. So it was a peaceful protest just before the meeting. and or before the debate, and we had an opportunity to see some of the politicians. During the session, they actually referred to the picketing outside, to white privilege protesting outside, so I presume they were referring to me and a few other white people. It's definitely not a white protest outside, definitely not. But the perception is that it's about the protection of white privilege, and that's definitely not our position at all. Any case, what happened? What happened in Parliament? The moment the bill was adopted by the National Assembly, the National Department of Basic Education sent out that first block to say it was welcome the passing of the bill. And there you see the numbers. In the National Assembly, 223 supported the bill, that's no politicians, and 83 were against. Now, in the National Assembly, normally the minister would introduce the bill. In this instance, the minister sent the deputy minister to introduce the bill. And based on the numbers in Parliament, you'll get more terms to speak and also longer time. So there's a schedule of speakers. So the ruling party had 4 slots on the program, and then the opposition, different slots and time allocation. And then they would debate the bill, and after the bill, they would put it to vote. Now, in this instance, the vote wasn't like we've seen on TV with the public protector, where politician by politician would vote, or even a secret vote. In this instance, the chief whips of the parties would inform the chair of the session, the speaker, of the number of politicians, members present in the chamber and those online, and then say we support or we don't support. In the initial debate, the politicians would indicate, the political parties, whether they support or reject the bill or partly support it. And during the debate, it was clear that the Inkatha Freedom Party didn't support the full bill or all the clauses, but when it came to vote, the chief whip announced on behalf of all the members that they support the bill. So the 223 is basically everybody in attendance in person or online, except the 83 came from the DA, the ACDP, and the Freedom Front, who voted against the BELA bill. And that was the first step in this process, and I'm going to speak to that process now. But the minister took us in the media, didn't take it too kindly that they were opposition. And even the deputy minister said the opposition, not only referring to the politicians, but also referring to us, to say, you guys don't listen. We don't want to take away the powers of SGBs. It's a false message you are spreading, and I'll touch on that. But there's still a journey to travel. And in the debate, it was interesting, and the reason why I attended was not only to picket, but to listen to what are those things that the politicians think they need to highlight in the debate. If we're going to approach the court, what will be the strategies to deal with what they've said? Now, the ANC had 4 opportunities to speak. I'm not going to deal with the deputy minister, but all their speakers made a point of addressing the public participation process, the fact that they consulted widely and they considered every single piece that was sent to them. So clearly they're either very confident or a bit cautious about a possible challenge on the process, whether they've really used all the comments. My concern about the public participation process is that the politicians, to a certain extent, regarded that as a referendum. And you're not supposed to only count the heads, but listen to the substantive contributions. And obviously that will open up a procedural challenge, and we're going to address that. If the bill is passed and signed into law by the president, we will be one of the parties that will bring a challenge to not only some of the clauses in the bill, but also on the procedural side. That last photo say no to the BELA bill. When I eventually left Parliament just before 6 o'clock and I was starting to walk back to the hotel, that was the only banner or placard still outside, lying with a few footsteps over the bill. And I thought, geez, that's a, that's a message. It was really stepped on. But I'm not in despair, and I'm giving this feedback to say, what can we do? And thank you for the questions that you've sent in. And there's the questions. And I'm going to try to address the questions as we go along, and maybe we'll have more. How will the BELA legislation affect us as a Quintile 5 school, who also runs one of our hostels as a guest house for extra income? How can we stop the bill? Going back to the drawing board, have they ignored our voices? Can we create awareness to be able to shout louder? What are the core principles underpinning the BELA bill? This to say what the government claimed to fix or improve. And I'll touch on that as well. The bottom line is that there's a whole process that will play out. The first part of the portfolio committee was their duty to work through the clauses and do the operational work, get the public participation, and the next phase is then to take it to Parliament. So what happened in the National Council or the National NC, so that should be the NA, the National Assembly. In the National Assembly, that's what happened on Thursday. It was put to vote in the National Assembly. Now, our structure of governance is the National Assembly and then the National Council of Provinces. And both these, let's call it houses of parliament, must adopt before it will be sent to the president to sign it into law. And there's the buildings. Now you say, well, I refer to 2, but you've got 3 buildings there, Jaco. Yes, they're temporarily using another building because the first one burned down. So that's why there are still 3 buildings there. We used one of the smaller venues for the debate because of the damage, the fire damage to the National Assembly. And I didn't expect anything else to happen as what happened when they adopted the bill in the Portfolio Committee, where the ANC and the EFF used the majority to simply push it through, and we expected that to happen in the National Assembly, and it's exactly what happened. Now, it was passed by one of the houses. It must now go to the National Council of Provinces. Now, you'll be aware of the fact that National Department doesn't have any schools. The Minister sometimes refers to the fact that she doesn't have a single school, and she's correct, because our 9 provinces are responsible for our schooling sector. So in the National Council of Provinces, they'll have to debate this bill as well. And there is an opportunity where they may ask the Speaker as a province to say, we want to embark on a public participation process as a province because we're responsible and we want to get inputs from the people in our province. That the process of the Portfolio Committee wasn't sufficient, that we want to run another one. And I presume we're going to see a request like that. And then obviously there will be time spent on that. I think the biggest challenge still for this bill is time, because this administration must finalize all the bills before the next election. And the next election must take place between, I think, the 8th of May and the 22nd or mid-August. And normally our parliament will stop their operational work 2 months before the date of the election, and all the politicians will go to the constituencies to start to work and get voters ready to vote. And there's a Christmas recess as well, so I cannot see that the politicians will offer the Christmas. But I'm told there are 41 pieces of legislation, of bills in this pipeline that must be adopted and debated, as well as a number of reports that must be tabled. So I think the timeline will be very tight for Parliament to go through the full process without making some procedural mistakes. So it will be a challenge to get everything done if the provinces decide that they would like to embark on a public participation process. In theory, it's possible for the National Council of Provinces to say we're not going to adopt this, or we would like to adopt it with amendments. And then in terms of the rules of Parliament, there must be a mediation process between these 2 houses. And if they cannot agree after the mediation, the bill will be referred back to the National Assembly, and then 2/3 must adopt it instead of the 50+1. So that's the process that will follow. Let's say it's adopted by the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. What will happen then? Then it will be sent to our president to sign it into law. Then it will no longer be a bill, it will be a law. And President Ramaphosa there are three possible options for him. We know isn't that fast to sign documents, but there will definitely be pressure, as I do believe that the BELA bill is part of the political maneuvering and the political ball that will be used in the national election. The president can sign it, and the moment he signs the bill, it will be in force. Or in the document, he can stipulate the date in which it will come into force. I think the challenge will be on grade R, as we have a constitutional right to education and it's immediately realizable. In other words, it cannot be staggered or phased in. So we cannot start with grade 1s or grade Rs in Gauteng and not in the Western Cape, or in Limpopo and not in the other provinces. And the cost, the estimate to bring in the compulsory grade R is between 12 billion and 17 billion, depending on who you are listening to. And we don't have additional funds for grade R. It must come from the education budget. So I do believe that will be one of the stumbling blocks to get sufficient educators and classrooms ready, or maybe they can split when it will come into force. But normally, when it's signed into law, it can be enforced immediately, nothing that will prohibit, and within 30 days after the president signed it, SGBs must submit their language policies and admissions policies for approval by the HOD, and the HOD can veto and change your language and admissions policy. Back to the Deputy Minister. She said, we're not listening. They don't want to take away the rights and responsibilities of SGBs. They're still responsible for language and admissions policies. Yes, Minister, Deputy Minister, but if somebody can veto it, who's really in charge? So you centralize that power. So we are listening very carefully. And I think you're wrong when you tell the people you're not taking it away. You are vetoing, you are centralizing power, and that's our concern. The second option for the president is to say, I'm not happy with this. I've got serious concerns. I'm referring it back to Parliament to reconsider. Based on our time frame, it's unlikely, but it's possible to happen. Or the president can decide out of his own. There are possibly matters that the Constitutional Court must rule on, whether it's constitutional to do this, and he can refer it to the Constitutional Court. But again, with the national election happening next year in a tight time frame, I think it's unlikely. Not impossible, it's unlikely. But the moment there's a signature, then a few things will happen. Now let's go there. What happens when the president signs the bill? The bill becomes law. At that stage, the officials can instruct schools to follow the amendments in terms of the proposed bill. But until it's signed into law, nobody can say you need to do 1, 2, or 3. Everybody that's from Mpumalanga and from the Eastern Cape, you can tell the officials it's not law yet, and hopefully it's not. It's still a bill. You cannot enforce any of those provisions. And I must say, and I should have said this a bit earlier, we're not against the full BELAB bill. So we don't reject the bill in its entirety. If you look at our comments over the years and our documentation, we support a number of clauses that will make the administration of education a bit easier. We're in favor of that new definition of corporal punishment. I think it will help schools and teachers and learners. We're in favor of the new definition of a loan. We would like to have a single system for SGB elections. We support that parents should not lie to schools, that there should be penalties involved if you lie to a school about your income or where you live. We think that will help education. The undocumented learners is crucial to get clarity for our principals. So we're concerned about power grabs when we look at those clauses on admissions, the clauses on language. We're very concerned about central procurement. If you've listened to a few words of the Zondo Commission, we're simply going to create a space where people can steal and be corrupt if we have a central procurement system until we have a clean administration. Central procurement is not the best way to go. Two clauses that were dropped from the initial one that didn't make it to Parliament is alcohol at school. It's no longer there, so alcohol won't be allowed at any school activity or on the school grounds. And then SGB members, initially they said we must do a full declaration of your financial interest as well as that of close family members. It's no longer there. Back to the president, when he signs it, when it becomes law, what will happen? The bill becomes law, possible litigation, and not possible, there's definitely parties that will take this to court. Outside Parliament, the political parties announced that they want to take this to court. A number of civil society organizations like FEDSAS said those two clauses will definitely be in court, and we've got partners that will join. So I think they should prepare themselves for a court battle in that sense. Let me just go there. Great. You can see me again in the corner. So the president, if he signs it, it will become law. And then the next one is, we request our members, what can we do now? What should we do now? We need to plan for that litigation. I've sent a letter to all the SGB chairpersons and copy to the school principal, and we ask our members, please budget to make a contribution to the legal fund. In fact, ask 10,000 Rand from every school as a donation to the legal fund or as a special membership fee for next year, that we can take this matter to court. And as a collective, if the bill goes through, then the fight will move to school level. Then schools will have to battle on their own because their circumstances will have to be considered. So that's what we can do immediately. The other important thing is I want to make this connection. It's SGB election next year. The worst possible time because it's the same time as a national election. National election is not the best year for an SGB election because all the attention will be on the politics of the day and not enough on the SGB election. So that's one of our big challenges. Then, Minister published the notice, this notice. So the election will take place during March next year in all 9 provinces. So you can already plan for that election and make sure that you have your date. But here's the curveball. Last week, we attended the meeting of the National Task Team on the SGB elections, and we were informed that the CEM, and the CEM stands for the Council of Education Ministers, that's all the MECs from the 9 provinces, as well as the minister and the deputy, decided in that meeting that there will be a new quorum requirement. Let me just go there. I want to show this to you. There's a new quorum requirement proposed, and we'll see that in the regulations. Principals, hang on to your seats. I want to say listen carefully, but listen carefully. 50% quorum requirement, 5-0. Used to be 1-5. Now it's 5-0, 50% for the first meeting. The second meeting, under the previous regulations or measures, at a 0 quorum for the second meeting, the quorum for the second meeting is set for 30%. Now, most of our schools struggled to get to 15% and had to go to that second meeting without a quorum to get an SGB elected. Now, technically, it's egg on our faces as governors and parents if we don't show up or schools don't do enough. So we need to do much more to get our parents involved. But we don't have a quorum requirement for the national election or the provincial election or even municipal. So I don't understand why we have a quorum requirement for schools. It's also a public position through a national voting system. And we have written a letter to the minister today, and we have an urgent NCF meeting on Thursday to discuss this. But that will have a huge impact. And we need to connect the dots now. To make it more difficult for schools to get an SGB into place with BELA bill and the new SGB will deal with the consequences of BELA. I think we need to connect the dots. So our SGB election is linked, and the quorum is linked to the BELA bill. So we need to take full responsibility and start to plan and really work seriously to make sure that we're going to make a success out of the election. Now, March is a very short month. The holiday will start on the 20th of March. You've got 14 school days for that election process. The schools open on the 17th of January. So then you need to do a few things. 30 days before the election date, you must send a notice of the format of your election. I think we're done with meetings. You'll struggle to get to 50% of the traditional meeting. So our advice always is go for a full day election or the e-election or a combination of the two to make sure that you reach the quorum. The new SGB will have to deal with BELA and possible litigation. So it's crucial to get the right people elected in that one. And obviously 14 days before the election date, you must inform your voters. But if you choose your date now, you can already start to send the notices and plan accordingly. I want to zoom in on the election for a brief moment and touch on three things. Plan. Do your succession planning. Identify the people now. Co-opt them. We'll be able to deal with BELAB. You need strong leaders. Budget for that election. We'll have to recruit people, make sure that there's a proper campaign. Understand the process to follow. On format, move away from the election meeting. I think it's a stupid and outdated system. Go for your full day. Use the e-election, set your date, and understand your provincial measures. By the way, if you're from the Northern Cape, they just published the provincial regulations, so you can give your inputs now. They've published 15%. So it was actually sent out before the CEM decision, so we'll have to see how they're going to amend that. The next one is your promotion campaign, your marketing campaign for the SGB election. You need to market. You need to actively market the election. Doesn't mean you're going to promote specific candidates. That's not marketing. Marketing is you're going to market the election. You're going to introduce all the candidates. But you cannot simply say, let the water flow. We need to be very deliberate to make sure that we get the right people there. When I served as SGB chairperson, normally before an election, we would have an information meeting for all the candidates. We would explain to them, that's what we expect from SGB members. That's the kind of work we do. That's when we have meetings, just to inform all the candidates about their workload and whether they are really serious to be a candidate. Put your dates in your school calendar. That's for the election. 2 dates now. And then the first night will be the FEDSAS induction to governance. And the very next evening will be the second evening, and that's a school induction. Put those dates in your calendar. There will be a link on our website with ideas that work. We're going to share best practices from schools all over the country, what they've done to make sure you get to your 50 or 30% or whatever the target will be after our meeting. And then we'll have a FEDSAS campaign, but our campaign will not start before Christmas holiday. You in the school sector will know it doesn't help that we start to mobilize before the Christmas holiday. When the schools open, we'll make material available. We're busy with a fantastic project where we do recordings all over the country that will help schools to promote the election. Well-known famous people, TV stars and sport stars that will motivate parents to be involved in the education of their children. So you'll be able to use that in your campaigns as well. So just click on our website, that link, not now, but the material will be available when you start a full campaign early next year. Then on the development, good SGBs, good people on SGBs made the silliest mistakes in the past few years because they didn't understand what they're supposed to do. So SGBs, make sure that you plan that the full SGB and the management team will attend all the training sessions. Remember, we spoke about governance and management, two sides of the same coin. They must be there. The first evening will be a basic introduction on governance, and the second one, that school one. And then there's a whole development plan for the year. So if you serve on the finance committee, then there's certain sessions those members will attend and other sessions for others. Why do I say this? It's linked to BELAB. If we don't know what we're supposed to do, we won't be able to protect our schools or to really address the challenges if we're not well trained. In fact, it's one of the reasons they want to withdraw the powers, because they say parents don't know what they're supposed to do. So make sure that you plan for a proper development process. I'm nearing the end. The FEDSAS induction, those of you who have attended in the past would know we talk about the principle of legality, the roles, there's your coin, the structure. So that will be there. But the next evening will be that school induction. How do we deal with management on the school level? That's the evening where the principal and the management team will get an opportunity to introduce the school to the new governors. That evening, you'll take the guys on a tour. I remember on my 9th year as an SGB member, the principal showed me one of the rooms that I didn't know existed at our school. So take them on a tour, show them the school, show them the management structure. How do you work in the school? Give your finance department an opportunity to briefly give an overview of the budget. Remember, the new SGB didn't do the budget. They inherited the budget. So what are those limitations? Give them a report on academic. Get your different heads of department to report on sport, cultural, hostel, those activities in your school. And end the evening with a nice social function. Invite the old SGB members to join in for that session. For the school induction, it's important to do a proper handover. That's the evening where you give all the documentation, make a ceremony out of it, sign a code of conduct that evening, explain the importance, explain where we stand with the BELA process and what's expected of your new SGB members. All the FEDSAS tools, with register on the website, update the information, get the username, password to get access to information to help you to be a good governor, to do what you're supposed to do. And then our booklets, that practical guide to school governance. You can order it this year. Within the next few days, we'll send out the order forms and you can order those booklets. The new book is Welcome to the Board. Every single chairperson and every single principal must have one of those books. So it will be part of that package that you can order. And that evening, you hand it over or hand it out to all the new governors. Fantastic book about governance, how to run meetings, how to do plannings, how to manage the different personality styles that you get on that structure, and then the interaction between the governance side and the management side. So use that for that evening. And then there will be a special session next year where I will present something to the chairpersons and to the school principals. And that relationship between the principal and the chairperson of the SGB, how's it supposed to work? So it will be an executive session. So look for that in our plan. So if you click on that link on our website, we'll get the information, but we'll send that booklet now. I'm going to zoom out again. The next slide is the connection between BELAB and our SGB election. In essence, it's about the future of our schools. And that's why I'm so concerned about the BELA bill. That we cannot move to a system of state control. We need to make sure that our school communities still take full ownership in our public schools. If SGBs blatantly, unfairly discriminate, in the Schools Act, there's already provisions where the HOD and the MEC can actually address it, remove those SGBs, take away their powers. So there's no need to change the law if somebody abused their powers to deliberately and blatantly, unfairly discriminate against learners in the system. That slide is an 80-20 slide. Only 20% of our schools really perform as they're supposed to perform. 80% of our schools are actually dysfunctional. And 20% of our schools cannot cater for 100%. The sad thing about the BELA bill, it's not going to fix the real issues we struggle with. Our grade 4 learners won't perform better after BELA. Our schools in Limpopo won't have textbooks and all the pit latrines won't be removed by BELA. Our friends in the Eastern Cape will still struggle to get their norms and standards funding from the department and they'll struggle with appointments. Parents in Gauteng will be frustrated because they struggle to get access to schools. BELA won't fix the real issues of education in our schools, and that's the sad thing. And the minister and the deputy minister sells BELA as if it's going to fix the real issues, and it's not going to do that. But I can honestly say, I'm not in despair. Ek het in Afrikaans gesê ek is nie moedeloos nie. There's hope. there's still something we can do. We need to take full ownership of our public schools. We still have a plan, and there's still a process to be followed for the BELA bill before it becomes law. There can and there will be a court challenge, but on school level, we need to make sure that we do things right, that we don't cause problems that will lead to public schools become state schools again. So I haven't bought any tickets for myself or my children, and they're all in public schools to Perth, Australia, or Canada, or wherever. I believe that we've got a task to fulfill on this side, but we can only do that if we have proper support from our members all over the country. And I do believe that we can survive BELAB. We can. It will be hard and it will be tough, but at the end, we will need a political solution as well. And I'm concerned that if we don't take full ownership, the state will eventually take over. If I get to those questions, what will happen to the quintile 5 schools? You can still run your hostel, and you can still, so BELAB won't affect you on how you use your facilities, except you cannot sell alcohol there. So it can be a guest house, provided that you have the necessary provisions that's already there in Section 36. I think it's too late for government to go back to the drawing board, except if there's a provincial, in the National Council of Provinces, those provincial rallies, if they succeed in that course, then we'll have to show up in great numbers. As the politicians reckon, it's a referendum, not substantive contributions. The awareness must be there, and I think that's why it's important for us to link our SGB election with the BELA bill to say we need to take this forward and to be very vocal about it. The principles underpinning the BELA law, if I look at the politicians, the two things they focused on, the process, the speakers of the ANC said it was a very fair process. They've listened to everybody, all the contributions. They also referred to it's part of the transformation agenda. And I think that's where the red lights start to go up for me of centralization of power, where we're moving towards socialism or full state control. And I think that's the red light. What's the government claim to fix with this? They think that 20% of the functioning schools is the solution to 100% of the problems. It's not going to fix that. So I think they want to take a shortcut before an election. But the bottom line is, as communities, we can still do something and we shouldn't despair. Paul.
So there's a question I'm just sharing, and while we are going through that, if there are any other questions, folks, please feel free to type them in and we'll handle them from there. We've got quite a big audience today, but maybe, Jaco, if you can take that first question that I've got, and I commented to the lady that I would get it answered by you. So thank you very much.
No, thanks, Paul. Can you explain the reasoning behind criminalizing parents for their children's school attendance? Well, at the end of the day, it's the obligation of state to make sure every child attends school. And I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the department, you can read their own documents where they motivate the specific clause, is because there's a constitutional right to education, and the state must ensure that children attend school. So if you don't send your child to a public school or an independent school, then you must register for homeschooling, and that's the option. But you cannot simply keep the children out of the school system. And as the custodian of the children, obviously there's an obligation on the state. The reason behind criminalization is to ensure that parents send their children to school. But you'll find a full motivation of those clauses on the website of the department. I support compulsory schooling. And I don't think parents should have the right to say, my child is not going to get any education of any sort. You have 3 options available: homeschooling, independent schools, or your public schools. And I do believe that's more than sufficient. How will the bill ensure that learners can make informed decisions about abortion without parental consent? What age groups does this apply to? I'm on record that this is not an abortion bill. And that's not the aim of the bill. And I know some of the parties argued very hard that that's the root cause of the problem. I don't believe the emphasis of the act is there. Obviously, the minister can make certain regulations and rules, but then we can again object to them. So our position is not that this is an abortion bill, and we've been very vocal about it, that that's not our line of argument, and that won't be part of our court papers as well. We are against the principle where the state can make certain decisions and overreach, but I know some political parties and individuals want to moot that specific point. And if you strongly believe in that, then obviously it can go to court, but that's not our position. Sex education has been that's always been part of the curriculum, and we were part of the discussions. But two important things is the minister cannot prescribe content. The minister can prescribe outcomes. So on CSE, they cannot force any educator to use the scripted lesson plans or the UNESCO scripted lesson plans, to be very exact or specific. There are beautiful material available that is age appropriate and appropriate for a specific community. Our position is that the professional people in the school should have the say on what's the best material to use within a context of our school community that's age appropriate, and where you will have a good partnership between the parent and the teacher when you're dealing with that content. But again, the BELAB bill isn't specifically addressing those kind of issues. It's about the overreach. And I think within what we already have, it's clear. There's a letter from the DG stating that the scripted lesson plans is not compulsory. And in our legislation, the minister can prescribe outcomes, not necessarily content. So to that extent, I'm satisfied that a good governing body and a professional educator would be able to navigate that path.
Jaco, there's another question in the question box, or another response. How can we send the child back to school who has been at home for almost 5 years now? I'm presuming it's 5 years of education that we're considering there. And then I have got a message that's just come through on my WhatsApp from someone who I know asking for a friend. The 50% plus one, the 30% plus one, what do we do to fight that? Because that seems like a recipe for disaster. The WhatsApp says to me.
Yeah. Let me deal with the question first. How can we send a child back to school? She has been home for almost 5 years now. If she's of compulsory school going age, you must send the child. If not, then parents, not under the new law, under the current legislation, you can be prosecuted. So the child must go to a school, but rather start with your district office. There's in every district, there's a school support team. So go through the social services first and go through the process before you go to a school. But please don't keep our children of compulsory school going age out of school. And if the child missed 5 years, then there's an obligation to assist that child. So please don't keep the child out of education. It's our duty towards that child. The 50% and the 30%, what can we do? Obviously, I wrote to the minister to say, withdraw your decision. If not, then there's an opportunity for us to take that decision on review and ask the court to interdict the 9 provinces from doing that in their regulations. It will be very expensive. But the task team who worked on the national guidelines is actually a task team from the NCF, the National Consultative Forum, and we requested a special meeting on Thursday to discuss what happened at the CEM meeting. So hopefully the minister or the representative will be in that meeting, and we'll be able to make a call after that meeting on what we're going to do. Obviously, we're very concerned about the reasoning behind it. We would like to see what's the data they've used, the science, the consultation process they followed, and I don't think they've done anything in that. The question is, what will happen if the second meeting there are still no quorum? And that question is not answered. It's not dealt with in what we've seen from the department. If we look at our state entities and the area where we create the biggest opportunity for corruption is where there's a vacuum of governance, where there's governance that's not in place. So the term of an SGB is only 3 years. After that, there may be a period where there's no SGB. And that's the breeding ground for possible corruption. So, but those will be some of the items that we're going to raise in the meeting with the department coming Thursday, and we'll give proper feedback after the meeting. And those are the issues that we've raised with the department.
Yeah, go for Jaco.
Yeah, there's another question to say, well, if 80% of our schools are dysfunctional, then obviously 80% of the SGBs are dysfunctional. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of our problem. SGBs either don't attend the training sessions, and by the way, there's an obligation on provincial departments to do the induction and training of SGBs, and it's not happening. And to the extent that it's happening, it's inadequate, or they ask the school principals to do the induction. Now, a principal is supposed to report to the governance structure. Now he's training the structure that will provide oversight, and it's not working. So it's really a terrible loop of mistakes repeating one another. So, in fact, we really need a new structure in the provinces. I don't trust the provinces. Most of the provinces don't have the ability to conduct proper training. We offered our services in all 9 provinces, but currently we're only training our own members because government think they can do it on their own. Clearly, it's not working.
There's another question. With all these challenges regarding BELA, what happens if no one wants to be part of the SGB based on the work that goes into being a member?
Well, then it's goodbye to public schools. Then we're back to state schools. Then we shouldn't complain if the state decide what we're going to do in the schools, what kind of curriculum will be followed, what sport will be offered, who will be appointed. And remember, a few years ago, or currently, the state will then tell you the language and admissions and the whole curriculum. And one of the days, the state will tell you whom you can marry, where you can stay, where you can work. And it sounds like a system that we've walked away from years ago. So be very careful to say, I'm walking away from this. If our only option is then to say, if we're not satisfied with public education and we move towards a system of the independent schools, I don't think it's necessarily a safe space. Ask any of the doctors at your private hospitals, your private medical practitioners, with the threat of the national health insurance. The state can co-opt private industries as well, like they are doing with the national health insurance. So this should be a wake-up call for all South Africans to say, we need to protect our public schools, and we need to do our bit as citizens to make sure we protect our public schools. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. I'm going to just finish off by sharing some points here, just so that we can just pick up and round off the discussion. There is a list of our provincial managers, and please can you get hold of them. Before I hand over to Jaco, I do just want to share a little bit of my heart journey with you. So I'll hold on to that one. But there are provincial managers. Please get hold of them. You'll notice the email addresses are personalized, so we're dealing with people. Please contact them. They are on the ground to help you, all the way down to the independent schools as well. Please get hold of those folks if you do have any further query. Just to reaffirm, we are going to be sending the recording out, and it can be shared. There is the scan me and the details with regards to the Sim for School project, and I have dropped it in the chat box as well. Jaco, before I hand over you for the last word, I don't want to get too emotional about this, but I had a lovely long leave period. I was granted long leave traveling around the UK, and a number of people said, so was this a look-see? And I've still got a lot of work to do here. There's a lot of potential in our education system. There's a lot that can be done correctly if we work at it. And speaking today to someone, they said, what if this happens? I said, we need to get ourselves sorted out. As schools, we need to run our schools properly. We need to move from that 80% that are not functional. And there's a huge potential for education to remain community-based. In the UK, it's not community-based, I can tell you that. So if anybody wants to know, I'm not putting any employment records out there or looking for jobs out there. There's a lot to be done here because our system still is community-based. The towns and the villages can make a difference to the schools here. And if we don't shake our heads now, we're going to be in trouble with state control. So, Jaco,
absolutely agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Listen, if you don't agree with everything that we've said tonight, especially those guys who ask the questions about abortion, about sexuality, there will be different organizations that will move different points when we start with the litigation process. So if that's a serious concern for you, look towards the other parties as well that will moot that specific point. So the mere fact that that's not part of our issue doesn't mean it's not an issue. If it's an issue for you, go through your organization or the organizations that will moot those points and support them. The bottom line is, I don't think a single big court action is the answer. I think we need to address all the different items and light a number of different fires and to raise the concerns. As a diverse country, I think we can unite on the crucial matters. There will be some differences and it's okay. But I'm not without hope and we can still do something. So if there's a small deviation to say I want to focus on this area or that area, let's work together, but it's possible to make a difference. Thank you for joining. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody.